Good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Brenner, Senior VP of Content Strategy here at Cyber Risk Alliance and SC Media, and I am delighted to be helming this panel where we're going to delve into the intricacies and challenges of implementing a zero trust model. And I'm joined by Julian. Hi, he is the CISO for Penn Medicine, the University of Pennsylvania Health System. Caleb Frazee. Is it Frazee or Frazee, Caleb?
Frazee.
Frazee.
Yeah.
Very good. So Caleb joins us from Guidehouse, and joining us from Menlo Security is our good friend, Nick Edwards. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, Bill. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, so let's dive in. I'm going to start by making reference to a report that we just put out at Cyber Risk Alliance. We do these monthly cybersecurity buyer intelligence reports, and this one is on zero trust. And there'll be another panel coming up with me and the report author. But the gist of that report is that there still seems to be a big challenge for a lot of security teams, at least those who responded to our survey, when it comes to really having the concepts nailed down, really understanding how to approach stronger zero trust via the tech stack that a company may have right now versus what they may need to invest in. And then there's the difficulty getting user buy-in, which is something we hear repeatedly from this particular group. So let me start, Caleb, with you. Talk a bit about the challenges as you see them. And then I'm going to put the same question to Nick and then to Julian. And then we're going to move on to what to do about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for posing that. So and I agree with the challenges you've outlined. I think my own experience with clients that we support in this area has resulted in those same challenges, with the buy-in and organizational buy-in being a huge issue. And oftentimes, I think a bigger issue than the actual technical challenges, in that there's a lot of good technology out there today that an organization may or may not have in-house, but there's definitely industry leaders in this space that organizations can make a lot of progress toward a zero trust architecture by adopting these solutions. But as you've noted, I think it's the adoption that is the challenge, and how is this implemented with zero trust, because it's a framework that kind of spans an enterprise and really needs to be approached from kind of at a holistic level across the enterprise. If you don't have buy-in across stakeholders, to include your data owners, your system owners, who are managing access to their applications, then you're kind of set up for failure. And so I think that is there's such a big communication and change management component to zero trust that the IT professionals and leaders in this area should look closely, I think, at how they're going about getting that buy-in across stakeholders when they're approaching this challenge.
So Nick, same question for you, but I'm going to put kind of a finer point on it for you. So when it comes to what Caleb just described, and that is indeed what we hear a lot about from our audience, um, talk about people who approach Menlo dealing with these issues, needing help. Talk about the pain points as clients tend to put it to you.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's probably two buckets of customers and people who approach us. There's one bucket which is they've never met a framework they didn't like. And if you look at Wikipedia, it says zero trust was coined in 1994 by a researcher, by a doctorate student. And so over the past 30 plus years, this concept has evolved. Every vendor has their own story on it, every analyst group, and it's grown to be something that nobody really knows what the heck it is. Like if you have a proxy replacement, you know what that is. If you have an endpoint EDR project, you know what that is. What is a zero trust project? It means almost everything, which basically means it means nothing. So there's a second group of customers who come to us and they have a very concise understanding of what it is. And they're starting with very basic problem areas. They've unpacked it. They said, hey, we get this high level construct. We think this means to us the following. I want to address contractors who are trying to access my network. I want to address remote users who are distributed post-pandemic in this new working model. And so those are the folks who tend to have a lot more success because they've taken time to say like, hey, this is just a framework. I think I need to translate this. Even though it might be on the CIO's roadmap, I think for us, it means the following, regardless of what the broader industry, analyst, and vendor community means. Those are the folks who tend to have more progress and are making traction inside their organizations.
So Julian, you have dealt with this by way of, you're in a health environment. So there's some unique challenges that go with that. Talk about kind of the where you started with zero trust and where you found the most challenges and how they may link in with what Nick and Caleb have been talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. If I can take just a moment to frame it a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
it's really building a little bit upon the perspective that Nick brought. We all know that zero trust is a change of paradigm for cybersecurity. And for those that are non-technical, the way I sometimes explain it, think about any major paradigm shift out there, be it from traditional energy to clean energy, from socialism to capitalism. It's not something that it's done overnight or as a project. And I think all of us in cybersecurity leadership sometimes don't do enough to set the stage that this is not something that it can be done even in 3 to 5 years. This is a decade, an ongoing transformation that will take a very long time, and as such, it's very important to put it in different parts as part of a very well thought out roadmap. So I think that's the challenge number one. That's on us from a leadership perspective. I think the second challenge is, again, elevating it at a conceptual level, is the fact that a lot of the technology and the security features built in have been designed years ago, sometimes in the case of legacy medical devices decades ago, when security threats and the risks of today were not there. So you see things where you lack the granularity that you may want in identity, and the ability to have tight enforcement of controls that zero trust relies on. The fact that we may not have a very thorough inventory because everything in technology has been designed to be easily interconnected to give users full functionality. So that's really, I think, it's at a core foundational challenge. And then building on that and kind of answering your question, I think is very important to look at where is the intersection of our ability following zero trust concept to make the biggest impact from a risk reduction perspective, and what is the ones that can be implemented fastest, taking into account all the end user friction. And not only end user friction, I think a lot of the challenges is between convincing systems owners, technology owners to be part of the journey as well. And that's why sometimes you see either vendor remote access and application or network segmentation and micro segmentation as being like a number of initiatives that organizations go after somewhat earlier versus others.
So this is a question, same question for all three of you, and we'll start with you, Julian, and then Nick, and then Caleb. What is the biggest misconception security practitioners tend to have when they start to really take a serious look about what they need to do to make zero trust happen in their environments? So Julian, we'll start with you there.
I think the biggest challenge or misconception is that this can work well without a significant investment in data cleanup and in preparation. Because I think that many, be it due to the excitement of it, or being very optimistic, they launch in technology-driven projects and or even with planning for a significant change management, but then later on realizing the implementation that they have such significant data quality issues, be it from an asset management perspective, be in the application ownership perspective, identity, and then they get stuck mid through the project, and that's the worst place to be. You're already committed from an investment perspective, and you reach the point where it's very hard to reset expectations, and it's very hard to roll back, go backwards, move forward, and it's a very challenging spot. So I think it just take a lot of time to have that analysis and set up the platform, and then launch into the project and initiatives full speed.
Yeah. So Nick, from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest misconceptions we see is that a single vendor can solve the entire problem space, and there are definitely some vendors who are stronger and have more comprehensive of a portfolio than others. But what we've seen over the last 30 plus years of this industry is that buyers tend to gravitate towards best of breed. And that's kind of in the DNA of the security industry, practitioners all the way up to the CISOs. Yet at the same time, there are budgetary, constraints. There's procurement dynamics. There's CEOs with mandates to consolidate vendors. There's analyst communities who are, advocating for like the SSC, SASE framework. You can get it all. Here is the safe way of security. Buy everything here. And realistically,
all in a box.
All in a box, yeah. And realistically, it's just not possible. Now, maybe at a smaller size organization, maybe it can. I think we would argue that even that comes with some trade-offs. But zero trust, I think, at its spirit is such a great concept that you really want to tackle it the right way. And it requires some thinking beyond just the data sheet, beyond what the sales rep's telling you, to unpack, okay, what do we need to do? What are the areas of risk reduction we want to focus on? How does this apply? If you can find a vendor who can give it all to you and meet your requirements, great, kudos. We haven't seen a lot of folks who've been successful with that. They've started down that path, and we've seen a lot of people kind of revisit at the next renewal cycle for peeling off different aspects of that and looking for alternatives.
So same question for you, Caleb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree with what Julian and Nick said. I think I'll build on a little bit on what Julian said and just say, again, coming in and thinking that it's just a matter of implementing certain technology, I think is a misconception, because so much business process and access policy is inherent in kind of the zero trust, and what we're trying to accomplish. And so if those business processes are not well defined, if access policies and roles are not already defined by the organization, which in many cases they're not, then it's kind of garbage in, garbage out. And so, and those are not areas that are directly under our control or under the CISO or CIO's control. They're with the business owners. So it's really getting those business owners to buy in and to define their business processes and access policies, and documenting those, so then they can be implemented by the technology.
Got it. So let's take a little shift now. So we've spent the first 16 minutes or so talking about the problem. Let's get to what the audience has come for, which is the solution. And so I want to, Julian, start with you, because you're a CISO who has been through this, and you went from starting with the challenges to finding the way to a much more effective zero trust program. Talk about how you've done it, what the important milestones have been.
I think it's important, as I alluded earlier, to look overall all the time from a risk perspective. So looking at the risk catalog, looking at the opportunities for risk reduction, and look at the intersection of which of the zero trust related architectures and transformational opportunities mesh with those. And that's how we approached it. Rather than try to boil the ocean and go after everything, or just try to sell overall zero trust, we are positioned to respond to the zero trust, as I mentioned before, that it's a broader paradigm, but really bringing back the conversation to how it can provide solutions, really good solutions for different areas of risk. And I alluded, I think, from the way I see things, we have a lot of, many organizations have a lot of preventative controls in place. Many have detections as well. I think the areas where it deals with external access and with the ability to segment our internal networks, our internal applications in a way that you can better protect high-risk system, limit the potential of any infection to spread to the most valuable parts of our ecosystem. I think that's, in my mind, the number one opportunity. Of course, things can be different for others depending on the industry, the types, but that's how we look at it.
So, Nick, talk about building off of what Julian has just talked about. What are your thoughts in terms of milestones to be striving towards, and how to get there if you are, say, a Menlo customer coming to you for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, and I agree completely with where Julian kind of started and finished, which is the key milestone that we see most people start with is, kind of the third party remote user partnership access to something that is critical to the enterprise. And in certain ways, that tends to be one of the more easier places to start, because some of the areas around end user friction, the organizations have a little bit more control over. Hey, if you want to be a contractor and work at our company, here's what you got to do. Mr. Contractor, this is easier than giving you a full VPN, for example, or something like that. So I think there's ways that organizations have been successful with starting with those folks. And I think starting there gives companies the ability to kind of iron out some of the not only integration and deployment issues, but also very critically the organizational structure dynamics. Like in zero trust projects that we see, there's the security team, there's the network team. Oftentimes there's an end user compute team, and then at some level like an operations team, depending upon how they're structured. And I think a key milestone would be is kind of understanding who's responsible for what, who has the baton to execute, but who are the constituents. And a lot of times I think that's kind of an afterthought, and they just focus on the business use case without really doing the work up front to kind of get that sorted. So typically we see organizations start with kind of external access, use that as a proving ground that then they can address the technical issues, organizational issues, and then they would go more towards some of the managed users of the company and address some of their use cases. Those tend to be somewhat in better shape than I would say contractor use cases and third parties and internal access, because there it's kind of the wild, wild west, right? Like the old days of a VPN where you just, hey, if you log in here, you can have keys of the kingdom. Everyone knows that is flawed. And I think that's where there tends to be, in a lot of companies, the biggest amount of risk. And that's kind of the key milestone they start with.
Caleb, anything to add to that?
I would just add that, so my background is identity and access management. So CISA has outlined kind of their 5 pillars and kind of some horizontal cross-cutting areas. I always tend to start people on the identity pillar and work them forward from there, because starting with who's kind of on your network and where are they accessing. But as far as milestones, I think that also lends itself to, as I think we're all saying here, but choosing an application. Maybe it's one application and kind of doing a proof of concept or pilot with that first one, and to work out the kinks. And it might not be your highest value asset, because like right out the gate, you obviously want to, after you've proven with maybe a single or handful of applications, yes, this model is going to work for our organization, then it can be expanded to include other resources in the enterprise. But that, I think that would be kind of the starting point, and a key milestone is proving out, this worked for my organization, at least on a small scale, and you can assess as you scale further from there.
So I'm going to go back to you for a moment, Nick, because you've heard what Julian had to say about, getting on the right path. And so part of getting on the right path to me is when you're starting to examine your environment, what are the questions you need to be asking about your internal environment? And then if you've determined that you need to make more investment in zero trust, what are the right questions you should be asking prospective vendors? And so share your thoughts on that. And then from there, Julian, I'm going to swing back to you just in terms of questions.
Yeah, so I would say definitely, I would, well-running security teams, organizations have some general notion of where they believe their biggest risk is or biggest exposure. Maybe they've upgraded their firewalls in the past 3 years, but their proxy is a blue code from 2002. So I think there's aspects of understanding, even outside of the zero trust thing, which part of our technology stack, as it relates to risk and business issues, is the most kind of legacy. And a lot of organizations will kind of start with that perspective. Okay, well, here's some buckets and here's how we're prioritizing it. And then I think as they talk to vendors, I do think it's important to understand broader roadmap and really challenge the vision of the vendors they're talking to see what can this vendor do and align it with their core competency. I think we've seen acquisitions over the past several years of all kinds in the security industry. Everyone's trying to be the one-stop shop. That doesn't mean that vendor who might be great at firewalls is great at doing another key aspect of identity, for example, or providing access to web-based applications of remote users. So I think as part of understanding the vendor vision is really having an honest assessment of what are they good at? What do we give them permission to do and to trust them with? And then be able to kind of go through that exercise across their priorities, their roadmap, and then be able to align that accordingly.
So, Julian, let me swing it back to you. When it comes to looking at your environment and then reaching out to vendors, any questions or areas that you wish you had asked from the outset that might have made the journey a little easier?
I'm not sure that I can think of specific questions that we miss, and that's hopefully a good thing. We're pretty thorough in our analysis. Yeah. Maybe if you allow me to take your question a little bit more in the direction of similar directions. In my mind, for the cybersecurity teams that being the ones that lead the acquisition conversation, I think it's very important to look at the zero trust concept, and as I mentioned earlier, apply it to a certain problem space versus try to take the vendor first approach. Because if you take the vendor first approach, you're going to get a definition of the problem that has as solution that respective suite of products, and that it's rarely what's needed by the specific company and what's the specific risk profile. So I think it's saying it perhaps a different way. It's not about the questions. We can always look at what are the leaders in the specific zero trust niche that you're looking for a solution at the moment in time. You can even look at a platform, even if it's better from a financial decision. But it's more important to be clear what risk is getting solved and make sure that that solution vendor is able to fully fulfill that need, not fragment, not fraction of it. And then certainly, like any other new piece of technology, important to do pilot and understand exactly if the solution indeed meets the zero trust paradigms, or in some cases it's been some marketing terms bolted on the traditional way of doing things. And that's where I think, if I am to spotlight something where you can get on the wrong path, I think that's it. Just doing that due diligence piloting with the purpose of understanding truly that that's a zero trust solution that you're getting.
Super helpful. Thank you. Caleb, same general question to you in terms of questions that folks should be asking when they're going down this journey. And Julian has given us a lot of great context on how he has done it and where he has been. But when you're talking to your clients, what are the recommendations you tend to make in terms of preparing for the journey?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's going to miss this question, but cost model is always a big one, especially as with the intent is that this spreads across the enterprise, and there's always we found there's always more user populations than people originally planned for, and so I think having those conversations between clients or the organization and the vendor on what the licensing model or the cost model is going to be, and kind of nailing down on there. I know that vendors can get usually pretty creative if they want to in those areas, and kind of how it's structured, and depending on kind of the size of the organization and scope, they're usually willing to have conversations that. So I definitely wouldn't shy away from those kind of conversations. And then the other big one is just zooming in on interoperability and integrations with other solutions, because all of these systems in the long run need to be talking to each other, communicating with one another, and whether that's over API or what those connections look like, and then how those are protected. And a lot of these solutions at this point have a lot of a lot of out of the box connectors that they've invested in. So those are good. But then there are, if an organization is heavy on a certain platform, and for whatever reason, it may require a custom integration, that obviously can add a lot of cost and not be an ideal fit for that organization.
Yeah, compatibility with legacy technology is something that when we do our surveys, that comes up over and over again. Just because even when you ask all the right questions, there are some compatibility issues that you just don't see coming. So,
do you mind if can I add one point to that?
Please do.
Because one thing that I've seen a lot, I think, as part of your zero trust migration strategy, organizations should look at migration to the cloud as kind of a key component to that journey. And especially when we're talking about legacy systems, I think that there is value to be had in looking at legacy systems and evaluating whether it's worth the cost to migrate those to a new platform, instead of trying to integrate other solutions with those legacy ones.
And
Sorry, you made me think of that, so I wanted to chime in.
No, that's perfect. And for each of you, anytime you want to jump back in and circle back in, that's the beauty of a panel. We can do that. I also, before I go to the next thing, want to remind our audience that if you have any questions, you see that little talk bubble, the red circle to the left underneath us. Feel free to put questions to the panel from there. And with that, I want to stick with the compatibility with legacy technology just for a little bit longer, because that is something we hear so much from the Cyber Risk Alliance community. So, Nick, what are some examples that you have seen in terms of, again, here's that thing that despite your best laid plans and asking all the right questions, you just didn't see this one coming, and from there, how you got past it?
Yeah, so I think for us, we're focused on browser security as kind of our corporate vision and where we're trying to solve problems for customers. And so one of the areas that we see customers dealing with is there are a lot of great zero trust technologies that are designed around certain assumptions around the modern web application. And that works for probably 95% of those use cases. But if you take a Fortune 100 bank, there will be these pockets of web applications that are built essentially before the kind of modern internet era. And that means that contemporary browsers are going to struggle with those technologies. They're probably designed in kind of old era Windows machines and legacy Internet Explorer type of application, browser apps access. And I think that creates certain dynamics for customers where they say, look, I want to get this done. I want to get this off my plate. We can get most of the way there, but we still have to keep some legacy tech around to address those. And unfortunately, those apps are mission critical. Otherwise, they would have been replaced a long time ago. And now they have like a 7-figure consulting contract they got to put out to bid for a systems integrator to replace this web app and to modernize it, or to find some SaaS tool to do it. So those are areas that we see all the time. They've done the right thing. They've assessed risk. They've prioritized things. And then when they get to kind of the inventory of how it maps, there's some things that have just been around forever that need to be special cased. And that means they can't do the rip and replace as comprehensively as they want. And so I think, unfortunately, that just requires blocking, tackling, chopping wood to get that done. And probably being willing to accept good as not the enemy of perfection and completion. I think anything that makes better progress towards a more secure future is better than where you were today. And I think companies that kind of assess that appropriately can get some good outcomes.
So we have some questions coming in from the audience. Thank you to those who have added your questions so far. I'm going to start with this one, where this individual said that security standards are there for reasons. And he wants to know more about what each of you think in terms of security standards that are particularly important and come into play as we're on the zero trust journey. So, Julian, why don't we start with you? So for your journey through zero trust, which standards have really been your guiding lights?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think here a little bit to what security standard may be referenced here. So I'll just give an example, and if folks want to continue to chime in or give more context, I can add to it. I think let's take the example that I think all of us, the panelists, refer to, the case for remote access. That's one way where I think imposing a standard can be beneficial and necessary on this journey. I mean, the reality is that if you're not able to put that adaptive authentication and very fine-grained type of access control of what a vendor's employee can do, if you still maintain a large number of legacy devices, one, you will not be able to retire legacy solutions, and number two, likely the highest elements of risk still remain there. So the impact that the zero trust can make is small. So I do agree that there needs to be a push. It's been for us, and we've addressed it, but always a big push through this transition to zero trust to force getting everything or everyone up to a stronger standard, if you will, as part of the journey as well.
I mean, I would add to that too. I mean, I think the compliance standards, especially around data governance, I think have been pretty good. GDPR is clearly kind of, as a vendor, it's like, oh my God, we got to do this stuff. But realistically, it's for good. And I think companies that adhere to that, like FedRAMP and these kinds of things, they typically up-level the hygiene of their infrastructure and their processes in ways that benefit themselves and the customers and clients they're going after. I would totally echo what Julian said with the remote access use case of the zero trust principle. I think the CSA has done a really good job of articulating at the right level of detail. They're not saying what the admin console needs to look like or what knobs need to be, present, but they're talking about, problem spaces in very common sense ways that I've seen, people who historically may not be super technical, they're able to grok it. Yeah, okay, yeah, sure, I should have, some level of endpoint assessment because this person's going to access this asset and data that's critical. I think as an industry, the standards are getting better, and obviously it comes at a cost on the vendor side, but ultimately I think the vendor benefits as well as the people who are embracing this technology, because they get kind of an up-leveled implementation out of the box.
Anyone else want to dive in on that question before I ask the next one?
I'll just jump. I'll just throw out a couple. I support a number of federal clients, and so all the NIST and CISA have some really good guidance in this area. SP 800-207 is the Zero Trust framework, and then NIST 863 is helpful from a identity assurance level and authentication assurance level standpoint, as well as federation. And so kind of aligning to those as kind of best practices, even though they're ran toward federal organizations, will definitely, I think, is worthwhile for the same reasons that Nick mentioned.
Mm-hmm. So this is a good question, actually. How important is Web 3? Do you want us to take this one first, Nick?
Yeah, this is the part of the panel that hopefully gets controversial and interesting. I'll say it's zero, no impact whatsoever. Don't fall for hype. Don't fall for baloney that is not even understood or executed well by the people who are proponents of Web 3. Every big crypto-related platform has had problems, in terms of breaches, wallets getting broken into, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen startups say, hey, install our browser plugin, earn credits and all these kinds of things. There's Web3 enablement security. Don't fall for BS. Don't. There's no silver bullet to this stuff. It's good old fashioned, assessing risk, prioritizing, mapping it to a roadmap, making sure your vendors can solve those problems, making sure there's general gravity and momentum towards these solutions. I think this Web3 thing is a distraction. People who get over the skis on it are going to expose themselves to more security problems than they would if they had just followed the tried and true path. I think from a security point of view, it's smoke and mirrors. Don't fall for it.
So, Julian and Caleb, agree, disagree? Start with you, Caleb.
I don't have, I guess, nearly as strong as an opinion as Nick does, but I think it's. I don't think I will agree with him, I guess, on that. I don't see urgency to jump into it as an idea worth evaluating and looking at and seeing if it can be beneficial to your organization. Sure. But I guess also to his point, there's a lot of technology that falls into that bucket, kind of worth looking at. So I think you do have to evaluate kind of what's most important for you and where you want to invest to mitigate the risk in the best way.
Any thoughts, Julian?
I don't know that I have anything to add, particularly being in a more traditional and conservative industry. I can only agree with Nick.
Very good. So two more questions have come in. I'm going to start with this one, though, because while we're on the subject of standards and regulations, the question is whether GDPR cross-border issues have been solved now. Any thoughts? Whoever wants to dive in, just start talking. Anyone? So GDPR, cross-border issues as part of the Zero Trust journey. Any thoughts from you, Nick?
I mean, I would say, like, just in general, it feels like it's, there's a landscape of, kind of business dynamics and kind of geopolitical dynamics that makes all that kind of hard. I know there's work underway, and there's kind of different polarities, there's like EU, US. There's, China, other parts of APAC, and how that relates to EU and US. I think my short take is I don't think it's solved. It's still kind of a motion that's in flight. I think we're not quite there yet as an industry of saying, okay, here is the definitive, answer and solution for it. I think there's a lot of work that's been going on in December and early January. I think we're probably a little bit ways out from having it totally reconciled.
Anyone want to add to that? Okay, moving on to the next question. I'm just going to read this one verbatim. I heard going to cloud is the recommended route for zero trust, but we need to hear more on what other steps cloud vendors take to secure the customer data. Nick, I feel like this is a natural question to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, generally speaking, we sell to large governments, militaries, financial institutions, healthcare institutions. They typically will evaluate our adherence to standards that are well known and understood. SOC 2 Type 2, FedRAMP, Modern, all these kinds of things, and those are kind of table stakes. But most of these organizations have a pretty extensive and comprehensive questionnaire and survey that we have to fill in to address how we're dealing with crypto, and what do we do with data at rest, data in motion, where do my policies sit, can I constrain where those policies exist and reside, and also kind of an annual assessment, red teaming, all these things. So I think in general, if I'm on the other side of the table and I'm a customer, talking to vendors, I would kind of start with, okay, like what are you compliant with? Okay. Here's what we intend to do. Do you have customers who have gone through this path? Can I talk to those customers? Here's what we're going to do over the course of the year to validate. You ultimately can't always take the vendor, kind of word for it, because there is some interpretation and some of the compliance stuff. Most customers are going to have to roll up their sleeves, dig in, devote resources to it, to do what they can to make sure that they're aligned and compliant. And I think a good starting point is really understanding who those vendors' customers are. That will give you the best lens into kind of what scrutiny they've had, and where you can place faith in areas of interest to you. If they're strong on DoD, like Caleb says some of his, experience has been, that's probably a pretty good sign that they've gone through the rigor of, kind of assessing where the data is and how it's being managed and how it's being controlled.
So we're coming up on the end of our time here. So I want to give each of you a chance to just round this out with some closing thoughts. And Julian, I'm going to start with you. Any thoughts to add just to wrap this up, or anything we didn't really cover that we should cover now?
The only thing I would just reiterate that take a pragmatic approach to all of the zero trust journey, if you will. Communicate it in a simple, pragmatic, split into multiple tracks way. Focus on having the biggest impact first, and take the time to do the appropriate analysis and due diligence, more so that you would do with a traditional legacy acquisition. And I think with those, it will be just fine.
Caleb?
Yeah, I would just say we've talked a lot about kind of selling within the organization. And so I guess to that point, I would just say, as you're looking at things, I think that a lot of implementation of zero trust technology can actually improve the user experience. It's not a matter of security versus user experience. It's, if we move toward strong phishing resistant MFA, we can get rid of passwords and you don't have to worry about changing those every 90 days or whatever. And there you can also automate. There's a lot of zero trust is around automation and orchestration, and so it might take a while to get there. But as kind of new users join and they're automatically provisioned with roles and things like that, there's a lot of benefits that can be gained. And so I think highlighting those benefits, understanding those benefits, and then highlighting those to others across the organizations and your customers can go a long way to furthering the journey.
Nick, you get the final word on this.
Okay, I was a Boy Scout, and a phrase that I heard was, when was the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. What's the second best time? Today. I think zero trust is the same thing. In a perfect world, we would have made all these changes a decade plus ago. Okay, we're not there. Here's where we are. Start today. Start the process. Get it on the roadmap. Socialize with leadership. Evangelize why it's important. And don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. The threat landscape is getting better every day. Those guys are good. They have a financial motive. They're going after it. Don't stay still because they're not. Start today, and you'll get your organization in a much better place in the next year or two.
As the dad of 2 Eagle Scouts, I appreciate the that analogy. So thank you. So we are at the end of our time. Gentlemen, you have been a terrific panel. Thank you so much. Thank you, Julian, Nick, Caleb. Thank you to Menlo for sponsoring this. Thank you to the audience. This was a great audience, a lot of good questions. And we hope we've given you something to take back with you to the security team. Just a quick note, Julian will be back with us a little bit later for a fireside chat, and you will absolutely want to catch that. So until next session, take care, folks.
Cheers. Thanks all.